All right, hello everybody. This is Jonathan Petters talking, and we'll get started here with the webinar right now. So the topic of this next hour will be Introduction to the Research Data Alliance, how data librarians can get involved. The first thing to note is this is being recorded so that other people can look at it later and so that you can look at it later. And as we just discussed, we intend to share these slides after the presentation has concluded. So that's who I am. Chris Erdman, one of our presenters, whose name is on this title slide, is actually going to be advancing the slides for us. So you may hear us say, as I'm going to say right now, next slide, Chris. Okay, so who's talking? So there's first me, Jonathan Petters, who I work in the Virginia Tech University Libraries. I am also a co-chair on one of the Research Data Alliance's working groups, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. The other people you are going to hear from today, and in this order, are Lynn Yarmey, who is a director of RDA US, United States Community Development, Chris Erdman, who is Library Carpentry Community and Development Director, and Amy Neuberger, who is program head for data management services at MIT and is co-chair of several working groups in RDA as well. And Andy Ogier, who also works with me in Virginia Tech University Libraries and is co-chair of the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group. So we're going to hear from all these people in succession. One thing I should note before Lynn gets started is just that this is something that we drummed up regarding helping librarians understand about what the Research Data Alliance is. There's many folks who don't know so much about it, so an opportunity to learn more about it. So I hope you all enjoy this. I'm going to tell Lynn to go ahead and take it away, and I'll be monitoring the chat here for any questions that come up. We'll have some time to 20 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes or so at the end to go through and answer questions. So please put any questions you have in the chat. I'll do my best to keep up with them. All right, I'm going to mute myself. Lynn, take it away.
All right, hello everyone. I am so excited that you are all here taking some time out on your Friday morning / afternoon. I just am here to do a very quick overview of the Research Data Alliance and then kind of get out of the way. So thank you so much, John, for pulling this together. I'm super excited to talk with you all today. Hopefully there'll be a lot of great questions and discussions, so feel free to jump in the chat and we can figure out whatever questions you've got. So just to start off, I wanted to say what the RDA is, what the Research Data Alliance is. I think some of the folks here have probably known of Research Data Alliance and some are probably very new. So just to kind of lay the groundwork, RDA is a community-driven organization with the goal, and we're all getting together to build the social and technical bridges to enable data sharing. It's a very lofty goal for sure, but I want to emphasize the building component. I'm going to come back to that. We want to do things. We want to make something happen. So emphasize that one. We're very new. We're a very new organization. We just launched in 2013, but since then, membership has kind of taken off. We've got 137 countries represented by over 7,000 people. It's a very broad group of people. I can say that librarians are our third largest membership group. First is quote unquote researchers, and then we've got other is the second one, and then the third is librarians. So I'm happy to share those stats or talk more about membership if folks are interested. In the meantime, next slide. So I wanted to just say a little bit more about what we do. The RDA community, we set goals from a very bottom-up direction, and of course there's a truck right outside my window, so I apologize for the noise. The RDA community, our members get together and we start to identify problems, and then start designing solutions, figuring out what might work. We get the right people in the room to figure out what technologies, policies, practices, what the gaps are, and what we need to do to fill them. And this is covering any range of data issues: discovery, access, integration, the FAIR principles, open access. Reproducibility is a big topic more in the States. So really looking across the data landscape and tackling problems wherever people in the community want to fix them. So again, we're looking for problems and then solutions from our membership ourselves. Now, and how we do this, we've got 7 principles that everyone agrees to when you become a member. Openness is definitely one of them. We want all of our work to be visible. We've got community review processes built into a couple of different places in creating groups and making sure that folks have time to look at whatever outcomes are coming out, just to make sure that everyone has at least the opportunity to be aware of what's going on and to comment on it. Our work is very distributed, again, with that global community. All of our work pretty much happens at a distance. We do really aim to be an inclusive space. Now, that's something that we can definitely talk more about. I know there's a lot in that word, but trying to pull people together and recognizing that the more folks we have at the table coming from different perspectives and backgrounds and contexts and situations, the better solutions we're going to be able to create. Consensus driven is definitely another big principle. And given that we're working across sectors, looking at that pre-competitive space is a really important one. So we can have publishers and librarians and industry folks at the same table with the agreement that everything that comes out of RDA RDA work will be open and nonprofit. How we do that, we've got over 90 working in interest groups at this point, and I think some of the other folks will talk a little bit more about some of the specific groups. So it's basically self-identified members. As a member, you can join any RDA interest group or working group that that matches up with a topic of your that you're interested in. So next and final slide for me. What do? And I want to come back to that building things bit. We want to do something. We don't just want to talk about things. So working groups especially are tasked with building outputs, building those social and technical bridges to make data sharing easier. All of these are community driven, built, reviewed, adopted by our membership. And we want to make sure adoption is integrated right from the start. We not only want to build things, we want to build things that people will use. So I think we've set a relatively high bar for ourselves, but so far so good. Since 2013, we've got 23 flagship outputs. Those are our formal recommendations, 4 of which have been formalized as information technology and communications. Gosh, if my brain's remembering the acronym correctly. Technical specifications, this is basically a standards making body, primarily in the European Union, but it is that formalization component. So we've got 4 technical specs right now. We've got another set currently going through the ITC process for recognition. So these 23 outputs include everything from data citation to persistent identifier information types. What type of thing is this particular persistent identifier pointing to? Machine actionable best practices and policies. If 2 machines are talking to each other, how do we make sure that the policies associated with a data set are transferred with that data set? And then things like core trust seal and many, many others. We do have documented adoption instances of all of these things. So again, trying to hold ourselves accountable to our goals, not only to build things, but also to let people use them and make sure they're used to do something valuable. So that's basically who we are, what we do, and how we do it. I'm going to step back, let everyone else speak, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions or offering any organizational information that I can.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm Chris Erdman. I am with the carpentry, so I just recently joined. And actually, just to start, this was my first RDA. To tell you the truth, I was a little bit skeptical about RDA at first, but when I had the chance to go, I was excited. Because one of the things I noticed right away is the diversity. I think the diversity of roles, but just in this slide, you can see how many participants there were at RDA, and how many countries were involved. And I think that was one of the things that struck me initially about RDA. And then I think one of the other things, the trends that I saw at RDA was that FAIR was coming up in almost every session I was going to. And this is the acronym, so it's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I think what's so striking about this is that a lot of groups are thinking of this as a way to reach their communities, to think about outreach and how to get more of the researchers to do some of these things to help with discovery of their research. So that was striking. The other thing is, sorry, I missed a slide here. It's not advancing for me. But yeah, so the other thing I wanted to mention too is that there was a lot of talk about the carpentries and using that as a way to connect with the research community. And in some cases too, there are groups that they're using FAIR and the combination of FAIR and the carpentries in programs. So this summer you have a Go FAIR workshop to think about how carpentries can integrate integrate FAIR into their lessons. And then and then also there's another workshop at TIB Hanover. It's a week-long workshop which uses FAIR as sort of an outline for carpentry's material. And I think this slide is a good one too, just to demonstrate that the carpentries are sort of we're sort of a victim of our own branding. People list software, data, library, carpentry. Just want to say we are one carpentries. And so the one other things that came up too is there was a lot of talk about the success of 23 research data things. And how do we move forward with that? How do we take what we learned and do something similar? And so there's some work already underway in the Libraries for Research Data group that Andy will probably talk about later. There was also this announcement about stewardship group by Martha at TU Delft. And that workshop recently happened, the data stewardship workshop at TU Delft. So there's been some blog posts and summaries and some other documents that have been produced about this. But I think what's so striking about the TU Delft program is that they've done a great job in their outreach. And another thing that came up at RDA was that Springer Nature launched its new service, Research Data Service. They had a white paper that went along with this, and I think that that was sort of one of the side discussions that was happening about how does this work with library data services. We also launched our Shifting to Data Savvy, the Future of Data Science and Libraries report. This is an IMLS funded report, and it sort of gives a roadmap of how libraries can integrate data science in libraries into their services. One of the things that was pretty prominent in that too was the carpentries. Trying to advance again. So another thing that I thought was interesting is this PID kernel, principles of PID kernel. And this is a group that is sort of looking at PIDs, so persistent identifiers at scale. So what happens in a world when we're using many of these persistent identifiers like DOIs, and how do machines interact with each other to exchange metadata about these PIDs, these records. So that's a group that's sort of underway as well. And here's an example too. If you don't know, Skull Explorer is a sort of an initiative to where a number of these repositories that are issuing these PIDs are exchanging this information and creating a tool which allows for people to search these links between papers, data sets, software. So I urge you to look at that project as well. And there was a software source code, birds of a feather. There's a software group at RDA, and one of the groups that spoke was Software Heritage, and they said they have an interesting archive of various code repositories by GitHub, and allows you to really look through code, archive code in a granular fashion. So that it's an interesting project, and that I think after following this too, like the Software Sustainability Institute, I think they're also collaborating with another group, released some best practices or good enough practices for research software. So that was another thing that was happening. And I believe we are ready. Sorry about this. We are ready. One more. I think there's one more slide that I have, which is there was also more advancements with active DMP, so as to make data management plans more machine readable. And my colleague at the California Digital Library, Stephanie Sims, is working on that to lead it forward. But there have been some advancements in the DMP tool, so it's gotten a lot better lately. So I will hand it over now to Amy, and hopefully I can advance these slides better.
Great, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. So hi, my name is Amy Neuberger, and as John explained earlier, I'm the program head for data management services at MIT, and also there is a lot of other stuff I do within RDA. So when John talked about having this webinar today, I jumped at the chance because I've been really happy about how I've been able to interact with RDA, with what I've learned from RDA, and I wanted to share a story with you about kind of how I moved through RDA. So that's what this is. And on the next, oh, and just as a note, you see the subtitle on there, but all of these photos were pulled from the RDA website because their plenaries are very photo documented. So what we see here, this is my first RDA, September 2013. It's the second plenary, Washington, D.C. And I had been in my position at Columbia at that point in time for less than a year. It was my first year of my library position, and I was working as a one-person research data management shop. So being able to communicate or to connect with a community like RDA, which was really welcoming and also just with a depth of experience, was an amazing opportunity. As you can see, this is one of the things, my first RDA, I went into a session that was entitled Practical Policies, because I thought, who doesn't need practical policies? I need practical policies, only to realize once I sat down in that session that in fact, they were talking about machine actionable policies for dealing with data in repositories and things like that. And not the more traditional policies that I was thinking about. Fortunately, there are now groups in RDA that are also dealing with practical policies that aren't necessarily machine actionable, but I guess could be made machine actionable. So you'll run across groups like the Legal Interoperability Group for Data, which has some recommendations and some potential policies. There's also the Data Privacy Group, which is working in a couple of different areas around policy considerations and policy developments. And there are several like those as well. So one of the other things I really brought away was that as as a starting out research data management librarian type, got to meet these people and really found out that I wasn't alone in this field in the same way I felt somewhat alone in my institution. And they were a great group of people. They have a lot of fun. There's a really lively plenary Twitter component, as you can see from Chris's slides. And in fact, when I first started, I would pull down a Twitter archive from the entire plenary. If anyone is interested in doing an analysis of Twitter streams from a starting organization, those archives are available from the Columbia Academic Commons. Just so you know, if you want to do data analysis on that, look at network analysis. But this group of people is really passionate about data issues, and they are dedicated, as Lynn mentioned, to respectful inclusion. And the sharing on so many levels is such a benefit. This was a group of people that really broadened my view of research data management activities and was, I thought, really going to help me succeed as a research data manager at my institution. And so I was really excited when I got back and talked to my institution about this. And the next plenary was in Dublin, which you can see on the next slide. Chris. And it was, I guess I talked enough about it and talked about the work that RDA was doing that my boss's boss decided to attend this Dublin plenary. I had started shadowing a lot of RDA groups. There were fewer RDA groups then, and so that was a little bit more manageable, and started to contribute to some others, because RDA had really given me this sense of place that I hadn't found elsewhere in library groups or other data groups. It's this combination of technology and culture that I think is really an important spot when we're talking about research data within libraries and how libraries interact with institutions and researchers. And so I was able to start working with others to develop the common solutions to common challenges that I know I wouldn't be able to do by myself at my institution, but knowing that there's this community that I could reach out to, and we could bring solutions into being together. We could build those solutions, and then I could bring those back to my institution, was something that I found valuable and continue to find valuable about RDA. So if you take a look at the next slide, you can see that the FAIR being present at RDA is nothing new. So this is the fifth plenary. This is 2014, which is just, I think, a year and a half after RDA got started. And here we see the presentation of FAIR principles as one of the RDA keynotes. So this has been something that's been part of the RDA ethos for a long time. So part of being part of RDA is I was able to get exposure to these ideas, to these conversations very early on. And as you can see in the lower corner, also, there are some really great cartoons that came out of here that I still use in presentations. But at this stage, I also started to get more involved with data publication as a specific area of interest, and worked with the data publication reference model working group, so looking at workflows. And also because I had convinced my organization at that point that RDA was a valuable group and they had a lot of things to offer to our organization, we became organizational members of RDA. So I started to be able to attend organizational meetings from that representation perspective, and was able to start learning not just about data, but about how organizations themselves, interest organizations, professional organizations develop, because as Lynn said, this is a very young organization, so there's a lot of opportunity to customize and structure your involvement however you like. And that's something that I think in a lot of other organizations, it's a little bit more solidified. So there were these opportunities there to develop in a number of different ways. And one of the other things about RDA is that they had, and they continue to have, a really strong ethos around supporting early careerists, whether you're early career librarian or early career researcher. There's always groups, at least one or two events at every RDA plenary dedicated to helping you get going and providing the resources that you need. And these groups exist not just the plenaries, but like with all RDA groups, they continue to be active between plenaries. And it's actually between plenaries that you see the most activity in a bunch of the working groups and interest groups, because as Lynn indicated, the point of RDA is to build things, to get things done. And so it's the work that gets done between the plenaries. We come together at plenaries to have those discussions, to make those connections that make the solutions work. And it's the value of having all of those different intersecting communities at the plenary that really adds to the success of a lot of the different solutions. So you're able to have those crossover community conversations. So you might, think, I'm a librarian, I'm going to go for the Librarians for Research Data group, which is great, and which Andy's going to be speaking about later. But then you also have the opportunity to go to the chemistry interest group, or the archivists group, or linguistics, or biodiversity, or data repository interoperability groups. There are so many ways to bring the pieces together of, in my experience, what we work with as data librarians. It's a bunch of different pieces, and RDA is a great place to put the pieces together. So as we see from the next slide, time passes. The RDA is growing up. Deliverables from the first working groups are starting to come out. Things like dynamic data citation, the data type registry are being made available for adoption, and there's much more of an emphasis on adopting. It's great to have solutions, but if no one uses the solutions, that leaves a question out there. So the RDA's emphasis on making sure that solutions that are developed are adoptable, and coordinating with organizations to provide a place, an adopter, say a parent or a custodian for a solution as it's developed. So groups are always encouraged to work with organizations that might adopt a solution so that they can make sure that they're investing their work in a way that's going to be useful, whether that might be for your own institution or for another institution to take on whatever that solution is. So throughout this, I've been given the opportunity to contribute to work on things like the data seal of approval, which is now Core Trust. And I'm also invited to co-chair the data publication workflow reference model working group. Next slide, please. So this is the P7. It's March 2016. It's been 2.5 years since, no, not 1.5 years, because math, since my first plenary. And here we are starting to, where the workflow group is presenting its work as an output. And we're talking about a bunch of the adoption stories, the different organizations that have found this reference model to be useful in setting up their services and thinking about their own workflows. And also in parallel with the work that I was able to do, and which I was able to bring back to my own institution, to my own repository, to think about those data publication workflows, I've also been able to represent my organization at an organizational level. And a governance group called the Organizational Advisory Board has formed, which I've been elected to, and also have elected to a co-chair position on that. So I've been able to take leadership roles in RDA that wouldn't have been available to me as still at this point an early career librarian within other organizations. And that opportunity for development has been really instrumental to a number of different things. So also at this plenary is when I become co-chair for the Education and Training on Handling Research Data group, which was a great way to continue some of the work that had started within the regional RDA US group around educational and looking at the resources that are available for training and handling of research data to librarians, to researchers, to other communities of interest who have to work in these areas. And I guess the biggest thing that I would I would leave you with is this idea that RDA is a place where you can choose how you interact with RDA. And I think it's on the next slide. I think there's one more slide that I have. Oh, I have several more slides. No, I remember. Where you can choose to come to a plenary and to work and to brainstorm with people and come up with the solutions to the challenges that you're experiencing at your institutions, or challenges that you see exist in the research data community. Or you can choose to, next slide, take an idea to the next stage. So this is where we had such success with that workflow, with that reference model, that we started looking at other ways to plug into this system and see if there was interest in developing this idea, taking to the next stage. Or you can, next slide, start a whole new group if there's an area that you think isn't being addressed at all. So this is Elaine, who was one of the founding co-chairs of the Archivists for Research Data group, recognizing that a lot of what we do within research data management actually has its foundation in archival practices and archival history, and being able to bring those conversations back into the sphere of research data issues. Or, you know, if maybe you're new and you want to go and you want to listen and learn, there's that opportunity too. So next slide. You can go there and absorb the wonderful conversations, meet the excellent community, and maybe say hi to some old friends that you might see there too. So RDA has been a really great experience for me as a librarian. I think it can be a great experience for a lot of other librarians, and I would really encourage you to reach out to me with questions, to Lynn, to John, to Andy, to Chris, about different ways to connect. And I know these have all been pictures of plenaries, but that's the other part, is you don't have to go to plenaries to be able to work with a group, to come up with these solutions, to be part of whatever that group is achieving. So I look forward to any questions you might have after we hear Andy speak.
Okay, I am unmuted, and the rain has just started, and I may have a sick cat behind me. So if I disappear, it's because I'm saving you from some really strange noises. Okay, so the dangers of doing webinars at home. All right, so hi, my name is Andy. I am the co-chair, one of the 4 co-chairs for the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group. Whenever you get the slides, you can click on this link and it will take you right to our page, the interest group page on the RDA website. So go ahead and advance me, Chris, please. Great. So this is sort of a stock slide. Current co-chairs are myself, Birgit Schmidt from Göttingen, Julianne from Harvard, and Marta from TU Delft. We've actually had 2 peaceful elections and a peaceful transfer of power from our original co-chairs, Kathleen, Michael, and Wolfram. And we did, as I said, we held elections, which I think is a really interesting and fabulous way to choose co-chairs for, one of these interest groups. It was sort of a not a difficult process to implement, but it was certainly time consuming. Getting volunteers, getting statements from everyone, collecting ballots, that sort of thing. But I really think we have a really engaged co-chair group right now, which is really fabulous. So the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group has been around for a while. It first met in P2 in Washington. Generally, I think interest groups start as birds of a feather meetings, and quickly became an interest group. And we've met every plenary from then until just this last plenary last March in Berlin. And I believe we will also be meeting in Botswana, although I do not think I will be attending. But there should be a Libraries for Research Data interest group meeting there. Okay, give me the next slide, Chris. Thank you very much. So right now we have about 397 members, which is kind of a lot for one of these interest groups. And I've given you here the case statement that was drafted when the interest group became endorsed and recognized by RDA. And one of the reasons that I really like this particular group, I mean, there are many interest groups, there are many wonderful interest groups even in RDA. One of the reasons I really like the Libraries for Research Data interest group is this sort of front and center is this idea that libraries have maintained the written scholarly record for centuries. And building on this tradition, librarians have been adapting the principles and practice of librarianship to meet the modern needs of data-driven research and learning. So it really kind of puts that librarianship piece kind of front and center, and really focuses on how librarians and information science is rising to meet these new challenges, building on the past. Okay, next slide. I don't have many slides, so we're almost done. These are the goals for the group, the objectives. I'm not going to read them all to you because you guys have eyes and ears. Well, eyes, I guess. Some of the ones that I just want to highlight is the second to last one, acting as a conduit to bring together the activities of different regional library groups. I have been exposed to all kinds of different organizations, both within the US and North America and across Europe, Australia, Asia, sort of everywhere through RDA. And that I think is really one of the strengths of RDA. Advocacy and outreach, developing strategies for such things is also really important, and developing services and being able to talk about services with other groups who may be in different sort of political or governmental or sort of national situations. It's really interesting to sort of compare and contrast people's situations. Okay, the next slide, please. All right, so the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group has a couple of outputs. One of the big outputs that Michael Witt, who I believe is on the call, hi Michael, did in the past was the 23 research data things, which was modeled on, I believe, the Australian 23 things, which itself was modeled on a pedagogical methodology from, I believe, somewhere in North Carolina. You can Google it. It's all over the internet. And it's basically 23 things that we think are important to know about managing research data in libraries. So 23 research data things is an acknowledged output of RDA. I believe it's a supporting output. And we are currently working on 3 projects, one of which that I am leading is creating a 23 fair things. So sort of reprising this idea of 23 important things to know, but with a focus on fair and how to make things fair and fair in libraries. Another current project is the engaging researchers with research data use cases. That is being led by Marta Teperek and Ellie, and I would love to say Ellie's last name, but I know that I would butcher it horribly. Marta and Ellie, who are working on, as it says here, developing use cases for engaging researchers with research data. And then Julianne is working on a partnership because she is involved with library carpentry on this sort of fair content. Library carpentry, as Chris mentioned, is developing fair lessons for the carpentries, and we're hoping that maybe RDA and the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group can help out with that in some large or small way. So next slide, please. I think this is my last one. Yes. So why do I RDA? One of the things that I really love about RDA is this international perspective. Sort of hearing about trends in different countries, the way that laws affect how we deal with research data. I mean, I'm sure everyone, the privacy laws and all the emails that everyone has been getting about the European the new privacy laws. Another reason I really like RDA is that it is output oriented and they track adoption stories, which is really fabulous. So if you're thinking about adopting an output, you can very often talk to another group within RDA who has, or at least has knowledge of how a particular output has been adopted. The meetings I have found to be actually very productive. There's always the opportunity to highlight and learn about the host countries, which I really always enjoy. There are opportunities for networking with all kinds of cool people who do all kinds of different things. I've had wonderful conversations with folks from the National Library of Finland at the plenary in Montreal. I had a really interesting conversation with someone who ran the research, I guess she ran the research station up above the Arctic Circle for one of the Inuit tribal peoples. And so we talked a lot about, what their concerns are and how she and her communities deal with being the subject of data collection and also sort of collecting the data themselves and how they allow people or don't allow people to do research above the Arctic Circle. And the twice a year working meetings really push the agendas forward. One of the things that Amy mentioned is that, RDA kind of, it's not just about the plenaries. There's a lot of work that happens in between the plenaries, but having that, every 6 months or so, working meetings really kind of keeps you on your toes in a way that, once a year meetings or once every other year meetings, I think that there's always a sense of not relaxation at the end of a meeting, a yearly or twice yearly meeting, but there's always okay, what's next? What are we going to do next? Which I found to be pretty refreshing. So those are the end of my slides. So I'm going to mute myself again, and I would love to have any questions that you guys have about the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group. Julianne has decided that we will be called LARD. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. Okay, muting now.
All right, and I'll pipe back up. Thank you very much, all of you, Lynn, Chris, Amy, and Andy, and giving perspectives. That's great. So as you see on the slide, that this is the last time Chris had to advance the slide. We have the email addresses of all of us posted, as well as Twitter handles, and the Research Data Alliance website. So, and as I showed at the beginning, we'll share these slides. I expect that between Lynn and I, we can figure out how to share these slides with everybody who registered. Lynn, am I going way out by saying that? Nope, she says. Okay, great. So, questions, please. If you see some questions start showing up in the chat, I'll start addressing them as they come in. And if you guys are really quiet, I do see some question. I'm still trying to decipher GoToMeeting here, but if I'm correct, Amanda, Eugene, and Sheila have questions. And if that's true, if everybody can be quiet and keep on muting yourselves and unmuting yourselves appropriately, we can let those people actually ask the questions in like speaking. Amanda, you want to give it a go? Do you have a question? Whitmire? not seeing the question. Are y'all typing in the chat, or I
Yeah,
see
John, I think I can see the list. I think it ended up in a separate part of GoToMeeting. So let me see if, let me obnoxiously cut you off and see if I can get some of these out to the group.
Please, please do. I'm muting
All
myself.
right. So fist bumps from Amanda for having this. Thank you very much. It mostly goes to John. Oh, and Sheila, I'm so sorry. I didn't even see you were having audio issues, but I'm glad you resolved them. Okay, so Eugene is interested in an excellent question. What's the relationship between RDA and RDAP? I'll push that over to the panelists and see what y'all think.
Well, I guess I can try and answer this. As John. I did co-chair RDAP last year, so this last time. So the audience, the communities are different in Research Data Alliance and RDAP, which is RDAP stands for Research Data Access and Preservation. Currently, the RDAP community is a lot of research data librarians, and generally focused in North America, primarily the US, but there are Canadian folks who come and from other parts of North America. So the audiences are different. So as Amy and Andy and Chris all mentioned, and when the audience of RDA is very much broader. And researchers, funders, publishers, a wide variety of folks associated with research data management, repository managers, of all kinds. So it's a much broader audience, and it's also international. So folks from all over the globe are involved in RDA, whereas RDAP tends to be more locally, continental for North America. And so those are the primary differences. Anybody else?
Yeah, John, there was confusion this year because they ran at the same time. So if you noticed in some of the tweets that I featured, that there were people using both hashtags, so that might have led to some of the confusion as well.
This is true, and it will not happen next year. It was an unfortunate scheduling thing. It happens with every conference, though. Okay. Another question, Lynn?
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. Andy and Amy, any other comments on RDA and RDAP?
Nope. I think John explained it pretty well.
Okay. Amy, this one might be up your alley. Ingrid's interested in understanding if you've identified competency areas that LAS educators should cover.
That's an interesting question. Yes, this is one of the areas that continues to be a conversation piece within the education and training on handling research data interest group. There are a number of competencies sections that have been discussed. And libraries specifically are one of the communities that's directly addressed. The other communities that are addressed by that group are researchers themselves. And then I believe the third one is research data centers, actually. Now, you'll find a set of competencies. So while the group itself hasn't put out a set of competencies from RDA necessarily, there are a number of competencies that have been assembled by groups like Edison from the European perspective, and those have been separated out into different data-related roles, as well as, of course, Megan Sapp Nelson and Abigail Gobin's work around competencies and librarians for research data, which has been presented at this working group as well as Edison's has. You can go back and look at the different presenters to that group and see who has presented on those things. I believe the Belmont Forum may also be doing some work around that.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll note that we do have a new working group on capacity development for agricultural data. This is being run by some chairs from the interest group on agricultural data, and they're going to be looking at topics that may help address part of your question. All right, we have a few folks asking about how to get involved, which is an excellent question, and I will run through some of the membership options and just how to jump in and questions that I can answer in a couple minutes. But in the meantime, I want to get to the other some of the other ones for the panelists. Regina's looking at organizational membership. Would a library that's part of an organization or university be able to join at a lower annual fee?
So this is Amy. And like I said, I'm the co-chair of the Organizational Advisory Board. So the annual fees are set based on organizational size. And if your organization is the library that's joining, then it's only counting those library members as part of setting that fee. So depending on the size of your library, you're probably looking at, unless it's extraordinarily large, you're looking at a fee of between $1,000 and $2,000 a year.
Excellent, thank you very much. We've got another question about, for the panelists, wondering if any of you are involved in data curation processes with researchers. I can get you started. And if you have a more specific question, I know data curation processes are kind of big. If there's something more specific that you're interested in, please type it in. But in the meantime, maybe if you all can just talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with the researchers.
I guess I'll take a stab at that. I used to be embedded in astronomy, so I did some work in that space. But I think as in my new role with the carpentries, seeing some interesting things. Like one example that's coming to mind is that one group at the University of Calgary, the catalogers unit, is interested in doing training, library carpentry training to. I think one particular aspect is to help with outreach so that they can start conversing with researchers and helping them with curating, different research outputs. So I thought that was interesting. That's something that's come up, but seeing a lot of variations in how units are thinking about how they integrate the carpentry's training into how they present and how they're offering some of their services.
Excellent, thank you so much. And specifically looking at policy development, especially in librarians' curation role in the curation process.
I'll jump in a little bit here. So between Andy and I and our data curator, we run a research data repository called VTech Data for Virginia Tech researchers, and do have policies associated with deposit of data into our repository, and publication policies as well associated with what kind of metadata we expect to have with data that we get into our repository. And with creating data citations, what we need before we create data citations for the data, and that we want people not to put stuff in the repository that's illegal or will cause us strife in the future. So we do have policies around those kinds of things, around the curation of data in our repository. A lot of these policies for research data repositories at institutions are online and are findable. If you go to the research data repository, you typically can click around and you'll find the kind of agreements that different repositories have towards these kind of things. Happy to share what we have, but they are available online. But happy to talk
The
more
other
about.
thing, the other thing I would add on to that, Jonathan, about if people are looking for those curatorial policies is that the database, the information that both the data seal of approval and core trust seal have, because organizations have to fill out the form saying, do you have these policies? And if so, where are these policies located for those repositories? So that's another good place to look for a variety of policies.
Yeah, and I'll just add that was actually a big discussion at RDA about making these policies more findable and hopefully machine readable in some ways. And I'm not sure they got anywhere, but there was a big discussion about how do we share these. And I think one of the places that is building itself up to be a resource in this way is the fair sharing portal, I think. But I could be corrected by that. But there's still a lot of ways. There's still a long ways to go with this, but it would definitely help. So you're seeing a lot of, well, not a lot, but you're seeing some research papers coming out. Like I think there was a social sciences one that came out where they tried to look at the different policies that are out there from publishers and see how what they're saying in their different policies. So
Yeah, absolutely. So Fair Sharing is an organization now that grew out of an RDA working group on biosharing. So it started in the life sciences, has now grown to more interdisciplinary work. And the other group, if anyone's interested, is policy standardization and implementation, which is an interest group. So I can send some links in these. Maybe I can just add a few notes at the end of the slides. We do have one more question, and then maybe I'll just do a couple minutes at the end of how folks can get involved if you're interested. If each of the panelists, one of the questions that came in, which I love, what benefits can RDA provide for members? So maybe if each of you just does a top 2 or top 3 benefits that you've seen from RDA just in your work personally. Amy, I know you mentioned this, I think, a little bit in your slides, so maybe we can start with you.
Absolutely. It's something very similar to what Andy said, and it's the opportunity to have a bigger picture of the research data landscape, say, is one of them. Another is the ability to not just understand that community, but to connect with that community. And then finally, the fact that you can go out to RDA and put together with others a solution to a problem that you could not have assembled by yourself, and then bring that back with you to implement to make your life easier and your job and yourself more effective at your job. I would say those are my top 3.
Yeah, I would plus one both or all 3 of Amy's. That wider scope, that bigger picture of research data, I think is really important. And then the being able to identify a problem and then put together a group of people from all over the place who are all also interested in that problem. Each year, I'm always kind of amazed by the birds of a feather sessions and the things that people are interested in talking about. I have no agricultural background, but I always find the agricultural interest groups and working groups really interesting, just the way that those disciplines are considered and acted upon. So wider scope both globally and I think disciplinarily, maybe, if that's a word. So those are my 2.
And the only thing that I would add, because those were great suggestions too, is that I found at RDA too that you have all these people from different roles, different organizations, and it's an opportunity to discuss collaborations and to actually, in some ways, develop grants. And so in some cases, I wasn't able to make sessions because I was having meetings with people about potential grants or collaboration. So that was great experience to have all that happening on the side.
And I'll pass so Lynn can quick tell us about getting involved before everybody has to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So just very quickly, thanks to everyone for hanging in there. Anyone can join RDA for free, only the organizations. If an organization joins, there's a fee for that, but membership for individuals is free. I put the link in the chat to check it out. There's a green Join Our Community button underneath the guiding principles, so you are more than welcome to jump on that. If you go to that one, you'll be assigned to all of our newsletters. It's a once-a-month email that you'll get. If you want to get more involved, joining groups is open to anyone. If you go through the group lists and just see if there's anything that jumps out at you, you're more than welcome as a member to go to that group page and click the join button. That will get you signed on to their email lists. Most of the email lists are not very crowded. So if you have questions, we do have 90 groups. It can be overwhelming. You are more than welcome to contact me and I can answer any questions and get you focused in the right place, or at least give you a couple groups to start with. Our next plenary is in Botswana, which might be a little intimidating, but the following one will be in Philadelphia in the spring, in April. So that might be an interesting one to, that's a little closer to home for most everyone on the call, if you're interested in coming to a meeting and really checking out what we do as an organization. All right, so I am very happy to answer any questions if you all want to email me. I know my contact information is on the slides. John, do you want to wrap us up?
I will. I'll just say the same thing. Please feel free to contact all of us about being involved. That's one of the reasons we did this, is so we can help you guys understand how you might be involved and reap some of the benefits we've all reaped from being part of RDA. So we're a little over time, so we should get off. Well, thank you very much for everybody sticking around, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Feel free to turn off the broadcast there, Lynn. Have a good afternoon, good weekend, everybody.